Okay, sweet. So we're recording. Yeah, I'm Hannah, and this is Crater Lake on this first picture, which I put because yours is also Crater Lake.
Yes, I'm Carson, and that is also Crater Lake, but in the winter, on a foggy day.
All right. We'll go around and do introductions since we have a reasonable amount of people. Yep, name, pronouns, major, job, favorite place you've gone to, like your dream trip when coronavirus is over, things you're looking forward to in this clinic, and if you're UREC staff, which we only have one, yeah, send us your name via the chat so we can get you ours. I'll start. I'm Hannah, she, her, hers. I work as a wilderness ranger and for the outdoor rec as an adventure facilitator, and I'm going to be a teacher next year, so lots of good random jobs. Favorite place I've traveled to, probably Washington, even though I live there. It's just the best. It's got it all. Dream trip, anytime that I get to hike for like many days in a row. So right now I'm like, really want to go to Wyoming, hike in the Wind Rivers. So that'd probably be my dream trip. Expectation of clinic, everyone learns something and has so much fun. Yeah.
Neat. I'm Carson. I use pronouns he, him, his. I'm a psych major, and I work as an adventure facilitator and also in the rental shop. So when all this is over, you come get gear from our shop. Might be me that helps you. No, I'm graduating. I'm not going to be doing that for much longer. Favorite place I've traveled to? I think there's so many good ones. I think maybe my favorite beginner trip, since we're talking about, doing a skills clinic, my favorite beginner trip is a little hike along Baker Lake over by Mount Baker. For the most part, it's pretty flat, but there's, a good incline part of it, and it's really scenic. It's a great spot. A dream trip. I learned from Hannah recently about the Pacific Northwest Trail. I really want to give that a shot someday. I think that'd be really cool to do. And I think my expectations are similar to Hannah's, that we're going to have a good time and hopefully people learn a thing or two.
All right, we'll pass it off to Brittany.
Okay. Hi, I'm Brittany. Pronouns she, her, hers. My favorite place I've ever traveled to, not hiking related, but I went to Australia when I graduated high school with my grandma, which was amazing. Would definitely recommend it. I'd say my dream trip, I don't know, I have a lot of dream trips. Maybe, I think it'd be really cool to like go snowboard all over the world, like all year long. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
That'd be really cool. That'd be a really long trip though. Expectations of the clinic. I have a lot of backpacking stuff because I thought I wanted to get into it and then I just never did. And I don't know how to use said backpacking stuff. So thank you, friends, for teaching me and being willing to, and I hope to learn how.
Sweet.
Thanks for being here.
I think we can help you with how to use your gear. All right, Emma.
Oh, okay. My name's Emma. She, her, hers. I'm finishing a degree in the kinesiology and physical education department, and then I just hope I'm not jobless and homeless. Favorite place I've traveled, a lot of places. All of them, that's my answer. Dream trip, hiking wise, somewhere along the coast, nice weather. Yep. Expectations of the clinic, learning backpacking skills, and that's all.
Awesome. Thank you, Emma. Lily.
Hi, I'm Lily, she, her, hers. I go to school with Emma, so I'm also finishing my master's in kin. One of my favorite places I've been to is Bulgaria, and that was sort of my like gateway hike.
Yeah.
It was the 7 Rila Lakes. It was really nice. It's my desktop background, actually. My dream trip, I don't know. I just want to travel everywhere. So I'm not sure I could choose one. And my expectations are to learn some backpacking skills.
Sweet.
Great.
All right, Liz.
Woohoo! My name is Liz. Pronouns are, I always mess this up, she, her, hers. I'm a physics major and I'm an AF, and I also work at the rental shop. And I'm actually going to be working there, so you can come see me. Favorite place I've traveled to, probably I'm going to have to say Lake Powell down in Utah. It was gorgeous. The weather wasn't great, but I imagine that if it was beautiful on the bad days that we were there, it's probably absolutely gorgeous on the good weather. My dream trip, I really want to go windsurfing in Greece. I feel like that would rock. It's got to be Greece. It can't be anywhere else. It's got to be Greece.
Mm-hmm.
Expectations of clinic, I think just, I don't know, seeing what kind of like tips and tricks I don't know. And seeing everybody's, or both of yours, like different perspectives on the sport.
Sweet. I love that you refer to backpacking as a sport.
If I'm out of breath, it's a sport.
Extreme walking. Sweet. All right. Well, we'll kick it off then. Anytime during the clinic, if you have questions, you can write them in the chat. And we'll like address them as we see them, or you can interrupt and be like, oh, I have a question, and we'll open questions up at the end of like most slides. So definitely like engage with it as much as you want, because it is for you. All right. So this is a chart of comfort zones. So right now everyone's probably in their comfort zone because you're at home. You can turn off the video on Zoom if you like didn't want to see other people, for example. You're not really learning or growing. You're pretty comfortable where you are. And then your growth zone is like you're leaving your comfort zone, and you're probably going to learn and you're going to feel like a little bit uncomfortable with it. So maybe like if we asked you to like follow along and tie a knot with us right now, like you'd probably be like, oh God, I have to learn this over Zoom. It's gonna be difficult. That would be like a growth. And then panic would be your life depends on your ability to tie this knot with no practice. You're probably never gonna want to tie knots again. So we're just gonna ask you guys a couple of questions, and then if you go to the top of the screen to annotate, pick your stamp, and you can place yourself where you would be on this chart with these different activities. So let's say going on a backpacking trip with more experienced friends. Which zone do you think that would be in for you? More like the person that's a squiggle.
Sorry, I can't find the stamp button.
It's okay. I also don't have a stamp button.
Oh, do you not? That's too bad.
Nope.
Are you on your phone?
No, I'm on my laptop, but I found a check mark, so that works.
Oh, yes, that does work. Sweet. All right. Do you have one, Carson?
Yeah, I put it in. Oh, yeah. How about what a backpacking trip where you're of like kind of equal experience with everyone else there? Where are you on that?
Everyone knows the same stuff.
With your current knowledge set.
Yeah. So the key is you got to have some good friends to go with, I think. All right. What's your comfort level if you had to poop outside? Oh, good. No one's in the panic zone. That's good to know. All right. Let's do one more.
If you had to cook a nutritious meal in the backcountry, where are you there?
So we got a group that's like confident with their cooking, seems like. Awesome. Well, these are some of the things we're going to touch on. And obviously, like all of these skills take practice. as much as it's like, oh, I watched like 1,000 hours of YouTube videos on this one thing, you're probably still not going to be an expert. So but yeah, this will be good information. Then you can go practice those skills yourself, and then you can be that experienced friend that other people can go with, hopefully.
Neat. So, leave no trace is, you can see the text there, but it's about being low impact and responsible, not harming the areas we're in, reducing our impact on while they're there. And so there's a lot of different education and lesson opportunities involved with Leave No Trace. I know Hannah has taught many. We teach them, we're on the backcountry trips. And L&T changes a lot. Like what leaving no trace means changes a lot depending on the kind of trip you're on. You know, when you're in different environments, the environment is more resilient to your impact or not. So if you think about playing out in the snow, you can do really high impact activities on the snow because it'll melt, it'll be gone, it'll come back the next year. Some new snow will fall, no one will know your impact was ever there. Versus like in the desert, if you've got that like mature desert crust, the fungus that's like very delicate and will take forever to grow back. So that's an environment you have to be very careful in. Hannah, do you have any L&T thoughts you want to add?
Leave no trace is super important. It's like kind of like outdoor culture a little bit. Like you wouldn't go to some foreign country without knowing like if it's polite to eat everything on your plate or leave something or shake hands or do like any kind of hand thing that would be normal like in the United States, like, oh hey, maybe that's super offensive somewhere. This is kind of like learning how to like the culture of being outside to protect it. And some of these things aren't necessarily like super intuitive, like, oh, I have to go to the bathroom outside. How deep am I supposed to bury my poop? Like that's not very intuitive. So you do have to learn those things. And it's important to do that before you go out so that you're not degrading these places where a lot of people are going to visit them and they're very, very delicate. There are lots of awesome courses. You can go to lnt.org to learn more about it. But yes, L&T is super important and awesome. All right, so we're gonna give you like a little bit of a crash course in L&T since we love it so much. There are 7 principles. Do you wanna go through the hands thing, Carson?
We got 7 principles. The first is number 1, plan ahead and prepare. Number 2 is travel and camp on durable surfaces. Number 3 is dispose of waste properly. For those not in the know, this is a scoop in a little cat hole for number 2. 4 is minimize campfire impact. It's like a little campfire. 5 is leave what you find. 6 is respect wildlife. And 7 is be courteous of other visitors. It's like big friend when your group passing. So we've got all 7 points. Yeah. Anybody have questions about those points? Do you want to talk about those more in depth? Hannah, are there any that you want to cover?
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about them as we talk about different kinds of gear because the gear is directly related. Like, why would you bring a stove if you could just have a campfire? So that's why you bring a stove, so you don't have a campfire everywhere, for example. But I'll almost touch on, so number 1, plan ahead and prepare. That's like why you're here. You want to learn more about it. There's a lot of planning and prepping that goes into these trips, which maybe feels like it's taking away somewhat from like the spontaneity of like, I'm going to go out in the wilderness. But you really do need to plan ahead and prepare for your own safety and for conservation reasons. So making sure you have a map of where you're going, you know what the weather is going to be like, so you pack the proper stuff. Is where you're going even open? Is it the proper season? For example, there's a lot to research, but luckily you can find out what agency is, like if you're going to a national park or a forest, you can call them, you can find stuff out. Internet is great. I don't know what people did back in the day. I guess they just showed up to see what was going on. So plan ahead and prepare is like the most important one, because if you do a good job of that, everything else will be a lot easier for you. And I think besides that, we'll touch on all of these throughout the rest of it. Do you have anything else to add, Carson?
I just want to touch on dispose of waste properly. A really common thing you hear in backcountry sports is pack it in, pack it out. If you bring it into the backcountry, you are responsible for taking it out with you. even if you think it might otherwise like not be a problem or biodegrade. Like for example, apple cores are those will go in your compost at home, but you can't ditch them in the backcountry because there aren't apples in the backcountry. It's not part of that environment. So you might be disturbing the microorganisms in the soil or making some kind of change that really we don't want to be making. So if it comes in with you, it goes out with you.
Mm-hmm.
Pack it in, pack it in.
Yep.
Cool. That was it.
Awesome. Does anyone have any questions? Have people heard of LNT before? Just raise your hand. Yeah, okay, we got some knowledge. Sweet. You can always learn more. I'm also always learning more because it's really dependent on area as well. So disposing of waste properly, for example, like in Washington, you're usually digging a cat hole or using an outhouse, but there's some places in the desert where the most LNT thing to do is to like poop on a rock and smear it with another rock so that the sun will like bake it and sterilize it. But you wouldn't know that unless you looked it up and planned ahead and prepared. So that's why it's really important to know where you're going, because different areas are susceptible to impact to different degrees. All right. So what is public land? For the most part, you're probably not going out and recreating on private land unless you know that person. So all the other land is public land. And there are so many different types. I was just brainstorming, thinking of some, and then I looked it up and I was like, well, there's like twice as many as I thought. The big players, so if you're familiar with the Moscow-Pullman area, Kamiuk Butte is a county park. So that's controlled by the county, probably their Parks and Rec department. And then there's the state level. Oregon and Washington have a lot of state parks. Steptoe Butte is a state park. So it's funded by state funds, and they have the Discover Pass, for example, that you have to have when you go there. And then everything else is federal lands. So national parks are federal, Forest Service, BLM, which is more like rangeland. And then there's so many, there's wild and scenic rivers. There's a ton of different kinds, and their different designations have to do with their use. So all of them you can recreate on for the most part. But the national park is way more into conservation. So they may shut certain things off and they protect things in a different way. Whereas the Forest Service is about multi-use. It's about logging, it's about hunting. Like you can't do those things in national forests because they're about conservation. BLM, that's a lot of like camping land. In Utah, you'll see a lot of that, and that's more for rangeland. So when you're out recreating these areas, most of the time, well, maybe not most of the time, a lot of the time you're in the backcountry, which means you can drive you can dirt bike, you can drive your normal bike, you can chainsaw to clear the trails, but then there is a special designated areas in national forest and national park called wilderness. And that's like, you can say when you're going out into the backcountry and you see no one, you can have a wilderness experience, but wilderness with a capital W is actually designated by law and has specific ways that we protect it. So for instance, you'll see whenever you enter a wilderness, there's usually a sign on a tree that says you're entering Alpine Lakes Wilderness, for example. And past that border, you're not allowed to have anything mechanized. It's supposed to be as undeveloped and natural as possible. And those lands are managed in that way too. So when we go clear trails, working for the Forest Service, you can't use a chainsaw. You got to use old crosscuts from like the 1800s. So next time when you're out and you see those signs, hopefully now you'll kind of have a little bit better idea of what kind of land you're on. Also, if you're in wilderness, you can't ride your bike or fly a drone, things like that are developments, because you want it to be sort of like as it was, 1,000 years ago.
Another thing to consider with land is whose land you're on. Something that the outdoor recreation centers made an effort to do is get better at land acknowledgements, which is identifying what native people used the land before the United States took it. So how did they use it? Where were they? And so there's this great app called the Native Land app. And this image down in the bottom right is a screenshot of that. And so each group, you can see the range of each group in the different colored segments. So you can, before you go out, you can check, all right, I'm planning to be in this area. Whose land was this? how do they use it?
Yeah, and this is just a small step that you can take towards more awareness that these lands were used and have super important cultural meanings to a group of people that like were treated unfairly in the past. So it's just a way to start a conversation and start learning about that, because you can use this app, find out about the different tribes, go to their websites and just learn some more. Like it's the very least you could do. So it's just kind of starting a conversation about that. And so yeah, download this app. It's really great. Does anyone have any questions about land acknowledgements or public lands or any of that stuff? All right, we're good to go.
Oh wait, Hannah. So, if you're planning a trip or whatever, where do you go to find whether it's like National like Forest Service or BLM land? Like, is there one site that tells you all of that, or do you kind of have to go through different sites to weave it all together?
That's a good question. It is a little bit of detective work. So usually you can just sort of Google the name of like the trailhead or where it is and things will pop up. Most of the time, unfortunately, the like National Forest or National Park Service website isn't necessarily the first one to pop up, but you can do a little bit of digging in. If it says National Forest, then you're like, okay, this is Forest Service. And then if you Google Forest Service and the trail, then you'll find more information out about it. But yeah, it's not like there's a giant website that has them all broken down. You do have to do a little bit of detective work, but it can be worth it because if it's a national park, you obviously need to have a national park pass. And they usually have stricter camping rules and stuff like that. I would say for the most part, most places that people are recreating on that are not national park are national forest. So that is a good place to start.
A good topographical map will also tell you most of the time what, where the borders are of the different kinds of land. So, there might be the name of the national forest that you're in right on the map.
And a lot of times those, like once you do have a map, kind of depends what you have first. Like, oh, I have an idea of where I want to go, or I have a map and I'm using the map. We'll also show you like wilderness boundaries and stuff. So, and a lot of information. Stuff.
And it's important to have a map with you that has that information because while you're on a trip, the kind of land you're on can change. I've been, was on a trip that was in private property, and then like suddenly we were in like super low impact public lands. And I think it was technically wilderness, but it was a long time ago, I don't remember. But it was really different how we had to behave within 40 feet, right? So
yeah.
It's important to have that information with you.
Good question. Any other questions? All right, we'll move right along. Gear. So Brittany's got all of it. Her basement looks just like this. You can definitely go really overboard. You can go to REI and they've got a million gizmos and gadgets and get 1,000 things. But the reality is you don't need all that. Sorry, Brittany. You need a somewhat smaller collection. And gear is really personal. So we're going to go over a lot of stuff, but it really depends on your level of safety, your level of comfort, and your skill level. Like maybe you don't feel comfortable setting up a tarp, then get a tent that's a little bit heavier that has poles. That's fine. And there's obviously a range. If you want to spend all of your money, your whole stimulus check on gear, you definitely could. If you want to like have do more make your own gear or hunt around at consignment shops, like you can get really nice gear for much cheaper. So there's a wide range. Most people can get something that works for them. Sweet, backpacks. This is probably the most personal piece of gear and the most essential thing that you'll need because it's where you're putting everything else in and you have to carry it the whole day. So if it's not comfortable, that's not going to be very fun for you. I've got one of my backpacks here. Let's see if everyone can see this okay. And usually, like, if you're trying to get a backpacking backpack, you want something that can hold, I would say, like 50 to 60 liters, depending on how long you're going. And that's usually the units that they use. And mine just has like a big central pocket and then lots of pockets on the outside. I love putting stuff on the outside. Hip belt has pockets where I can put snacks and stuff, which is really awesome. But there's like a million kinds out there. So you really have to try them on yourself, go to the store, see what you like. Some general fitting tips is as you can see in the picture, you want the hip belt to rest like on your hips. You want most of that weight on your hips, not on your back. Otherwise, it's going to be pulling you around and it's going to be really uncomfortable. And then once you have your hip belt, on your hips, you don't want there to be a lot of space like you can see on the skeleton. There's not a lot of space between the shoulder blades and those straps. So that's the torso length. And that's something, some backpacks are adjustable. And so then you can get one, it's more one size fits all. Other ones are in like small, medium, and large, and everyone has a different torso size. I have like the shortest torso ever, so I always need like the smallest backpack. And then my husband has the longest torso ever, and he always has to get like the extra large. So like it's very personal and changes. So that's why it's really good to try them on the store before you buy one. Because if you can't change that, then it's kind of probably going to be uncomfortable. Let's see, what other notes do I have for backpacks? When you're filling your backpack with stuff, you want to keep a few things in mind. You want to think about convenience. If you have your snacks on the bottom of your backpack, every time you want a snack, you're gonna have to pull everything out, and that's gonna be really annoying. So thinking about the things that you're gonna need during the day. So like your water, your snacks, maybe a rain jacket, things that you don't need, your sleeping bag until you get to camp. So that's why that is most often relegated to the bottom. Map and compass are other great things to keep outside, sunscreen, stuff like that. Like if it's easy for you to get a hold of, you're going to use it. If you put it deep in your backpack, you're going to go hungry, you're not going to drink, and you're going to have horrible sunburn. Also, balance is the second thing that you want to think about. So keeping the heaviest items that are towards your back and closest to your center of gravity. Mostly the heavy things are cooking equipment and food, and then also water. So hydration packs will put the water, like you can, it will lay right against your back here. And that's where you should also put your food. So medium weight things are usually your sleeping bag. Also, you're not using that till you get to camp, so it's great to put on the bottom. Medium weight things, probably your tent. Also not using that until you get to the end. Certain clothes you know you won't use, and then food and that kind of stuff. That way your backpack's not pulling you backwards and shifting really weird, or like the wind catches it or something like that. You want to keep the heaviest things closest to your center of gravity. And then the third thing is having a system. Everyone has a different sort of system for how they like to pack their bag. And once you get more experience going out, you can kind of find what works for you. So like for me, I love putting a lot of stuff on the outside of my bag so I don't have to like dig in it all of the time. I guess the last thing about backpacks are some of them are waterproof, some of them aren't. If yours isn't, then you can get like a pack cover just to cover it all up. That way, if it starts to rain, you're not getting everything in your backpack soaked, hopefully. And hopefully it's also waterproofed inside to a certain degree. Do you have anything to add on that, Carson?
I do. I think if you don't currently own a backpack, does everyone own a backpack, or do people not own those yet? Raise your hand if you own one. Great. Okay. Then you might have experience with this already. If you're shopping for them in person, I found that I really need to, like at REI, they'll be weight so you can throw in your pack to try on. I find that I need to advocate pretty hard to get the amount of weight in the pack that I want to try it out. So I've been like 15 pounds, and I'm realistically going to carry 45, 50 pounds. And so it's hard to get that much weight in the pack in the store, but it's important to do because that's what you're going to be using. And additionally, for fitting a hip belt, this is a problem that I've seen a few times since getting this job of hip belts not fitting right. If the hip belt attaches too far out on the pack, then it can't hug your hip well enough, and it doesn't transfer the load effectively. So if we think about a top-down view and we think of this as the hip belt, if the hip belt connects to the pack like this, then and like buckles here. Somebody with narrow hips, it's going to fall down and put a lot of pressure right here. That's going to be really uncomfortable, and you're not going to want to go backpacking again. So make sure you have make sure your hip belt does a good job hugging your hips, so that the pack transfers the load to your hips and is comfortable for many miles and many days. You'll have a bad time. Yeah.
I guess one more thing to add on that is the weight is really important. So if you never really want to carry more than 25 or 30% of your body weight, which can be hard if you're a smaller person, but it's really hard on you. So trying to, when you are buying your gear, unfortunately Brittany already bought her gear, so she might have to suffer a little bit, but thinking about weight is also important, because you don't want it to just completely be so heavy that you're not going to be able to really carry that comfortably. And getting a pack that's going to be able to support that weight is also important. Last time we ran this clinic, we got a lot of questions about brands. Looks like everybody already has a backpack, but there's kind of three types: the traditional, traditional internal frame backpacks, and they're Osprey, Deuter, and Gregory are some great brands. And then there are more sort of ultralight brands that are less than 3-pound packs. And if you've got lighter gear, those can be really great. Usually can't find those at REI. They're more of these like cottage companies. Hyperlight, Mountain Gear. Mine is a Gossamer Gear pack. Those are also options. And then there's external frame, which Carson has personal experience with. They're like retro.
Yep. Is there a way for me to share my screen?
Yeah.
And then I can just bring a picture of those up real quick. So this is just a Google page, like the Google image of external frame backpacks. You can say they have the big hefty metal frames around the outside. These are definitely not the 3-pound packs. These are much heavier, but are comparable in weight to the heavier internal frame packs. And an advantage of these is that if you have to overload on weight, they remain more comfortable. An internal frame pack is going to be more comfortable under less weight, but it's going to be really uncomfortable if you put a lot of weight in it. External frame pack is going to start out less comfortable, but the comfort won't diminish very much as you put very much in it. So, when I'm taking my external frame pack out with like 60 or 65 pounds, it's harder work, but it's not really less comfortable than I have 40 in it. So that's what I opted for, because I find that in meeting trips, I often have to carry more gear. I also like carrying extra stuff just in case someone needs it, extra layers, extra water, more than I intend. And I'm never going out for very long. So I feel comfortable making the trade-off of carrying more weight for less time. So I opted for one of these. Dollar for dollar, you can carry more weight in an external frame pack than you can with an internal frame pack comfortably. But you'll find something that works for you. There's advantages and disadvantages.
We're super opposite, because I have like the lightest thing, but also I want to move fast and I don't want my back to break because I'm small.
Can I ask a question about the waterproof bags?
Yeah.
Is it like the same, like you have to like I guess replenish the DWR every like once in a while, or is it kind of like good forever? No,
actually. So those are made of a material called Cuban fiber. So it's like this. You should look it up. It's a somewhat new like development in material science, I think, and it is just completely waterproof. And since a backpack's not breathing like a person that creates heat, you don't need it to be breathable and waterproof. You just need it to be waterproof.
Okay.
So there's different levels of durability. Hyperlight mountain gear are super durable. I used that on my entire PCT through hike, and like it didn't have any holes or anything. Like it was really tough. But then other ones like from Z packs are a little bit more delicate, and they'll get holes all the time. So it just kind of depends. But yeah, you don't have to reapply that stuff to them.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Sweet. All right, layering. You're up, Carson.
So layering is, when we talk about layering, we're talking about clothing layers, which we need to have the appropriate clothes. one is very bundled, one is very not, despite the sound. Want to advance to the next slide? Oh,
Yeah.
so I'm going to explain about layering. Hannah's got some demonstration stuff here. So you can see in this photo the different layers that people will wear. When we talk about our base layer, we're talking about the layer that's right against our skin. It's for wicking sweat, it's for sun protection. So these like sun hoodies that we're wearing, these are our like base layers that we get for work. Synthetic workout type clothing typically makes good base layers. Some people want to spring for merino base layers if they're fancy. Outside of the insulating layer, outside of the base layer, we have an insulating layer. This one's for warmth. And you might need more than one depending on how cold your trip is going to be. Fleece, down, and synthetic jackets are all good options. There's more and more synthetic puffies as time goes on. Fleece is super durable. It's not as warm for its weight as down or synthetic insulation, but it's a really good versatile layer, also breathable. Hats and gloves count as part of our insulating layer. I don't go on trips without these anymore. I used to went on a couple trips where I regretted not having them, and now they're always with me. And then outside of the insulation layer, we have our weatherproof layer. So we need to be protected from rain, snow, and wind. So a rain jacket is going to protect you from all of those things for the most part. But wind layers like wind shirts and wind pants are going to get increasingly popular. Much more breathable rain jacket, but if all you need to protect yourself from wind, do the job more confidently than a rain jacket. And it is all layered up now. And what do you have on?
It's definitely too hot in here for that. Like Carson was saying, a good layering system is really key, because if you just brought out one thick, huge jacket and that jacket got wet or sweaty, you'd kind of be out of luck. So layering allows you to adjust to a lot of different weather. So if you stop and you're a little bit chilly, you immediately put on a fleece jacket. And then as soon as you start walking, you can take it off. You're also changing things all the time. This is especially true in the spring and the winter, because even though it's really cold outside, once you get going, you can start breaking a sweat, but you don't want to get super sweaty, because as soon as you stop, then you'll be cold. So this system really allows you to adjust sort of all temperatures and precipitation types. And there's so much stuff at REI, like they're labeled base layer and insulating layer, and there's so many different kinds, but realistically you really only need like one or two sets of base layers, and one or two insulating layers, and maybe one waterproof jacket, even though there are like so many things out there. This stuff can also be kind of expensive, but you can luckily find a lot of it sometimes at Goodwill. If you have a good Goodwill, you can find really cost-effective stuff. Consignment stores, also a lot of these companies have like pretty good sales from time to time. I'd say most of my stuff actually is pretty durable that I have spent a little bit more money on. So yeah, you gotta get a good layering systems, because in the mountains or kind of anywhere when you're really far away from resources, you're gonna need to be able to rely on yourself. Any questions about layering systems?
Or about the technologies that make it work?
All right, we'll move on then. Carson touched on this a little bit, but basically there's quite a few different types of fabrics that this stuff is made out of. So synthetic, if you run or do anything like that, just like work, it's basically the material that makes up workout clothing, because it breathes and it dries really fast, which is obviously really valuable if you're getting really sweaty, which I always get really sweaty because I'm a heavy sweater, so I need base layers. Wool is another great one. When you're out for a long time, especially, like I really missed the feeling of something soft against my face, because I was just always curling up with, you know, my sleeping bag that's got a synthetic like this type of material on the outside. None of my stuff was like soft. So wool is really nice for that reason. It feels nice next to your skin. And also it's got some antimicrobial properties, and it does not smell as bad. Like if you've got bad BO, go for wool because it will help you with that. That's why I like it, because I don't go into, I don't finish my trip quite as smelly. Silk is another good one. Those are more lightweight layers. And cotton is the last fiber, but as you'll see in this next slide, cotton is not a good choice for backpacking gear, just because it doesn't do a lot for you when it's wet. Do we have any questions on like the different clothing types? All right. Carson, I think you're muted.
Yep. So cotton is not a great option for outdoor gear because it's very good at absorbing water, but because of the shape of the fiber, it doesn't retain heat. The synthetic insulations, wool, fleece, all these things, when they get wet, they remain somewhat warm. Cotton loses all its insulation ability when it gets wet. So if you sweat and then you're out in the cold, it's really easy to get hypothermia. And that's generally something you don't want to get. And anything that cotton will do, some other fabric will do better for you in the backcountry. I didn't believe this as a teenager. So like, my cotton clothing is so warm, it'll be fine. Maybe mine's just better. And then I took cotton socks on a winter camping trip and had frozen solid socks. And that was a bad time. And ever since, I don't wear cotton.
What about in like hot conditions? I've heard that like if you're gonna go where it's gonna be like really hot, cotton can be an option.
I've also heard that like having some like a cotton blend, like a desert climate can be fine because it's going to dry out pretty fast. I don't have any experience doing that. I haven't done much desert hiking. Anna, how about you?
I would say like, for example, if you're going on like a Grand Canyon rafting trip during a warm season, it's going to be really hot. If you had a cotton shirt, then you could dunk it in the water and put it on, and it wouldn't dry as fast as those other fabrics, and it would cling to your skin and it would cool you better. But in most instances, you don't want something that doesn't dry fast and cools you. So even in the summer in the mountains, it's going to get cold, and if your shirt doesn't dry, then you're going to have something that is going to be a problem. But if you were somewhere where, like, yeah, you're in the desert for the day and you can have multiple stuff, like I can see why you would want to use it for that.
Doop, doop.
And if, it's really, the cotton is going to be dangerous if it can give you hypothermia, right? So if you can have some other layer on instead of your wet cotton layer, that's fine. I know people who opt and use cotton that way. I personally choose not to, but works okay.
I know in high school, I only wore cotton shirts to run in, like, because that's what you kind of got in like cross country and track, were the sports I did in high school. And then you go to college and they give you all these synthetic blends and you're like, whoa, these are like really fancy shirts. And then I think back and I'm like, well, cotton kind of is smelly after you run in it after a while. And it is cold. And it's funny because it wasn't really until then that I thought about that. But
So I'm reading that cotton is more likely to chafe. Are there any of the other fabrics that are more likely to chafe too, or?
I think it depends on like where the seams are on some of the stuff as well. Cotton does like clings to your skin, so that's why like you can see how that would not be good with chafing. The other fabrics I think do a good job. I would say the best would probably be wool, just because it is like a little bit softer, so it's not going to cause you to chafe. If you're worried about chafe, there's this really great product and like tight fitting stuff. If you got more loose fitting things, it usually is better as well. It's called Glide, Outdoor Glide. And so I think this is great for like backpacking straps if they rub you somewhere that is not great, or like thighs, or even your feet. Like if you know you've got certain hot spots, this can work really great for those too. That answer your question?
It does. And I'm very familiar with Glide after marathon training.
Oh yeah. Yeah, this stuff is seriously a game changer.
It is.
Any other questions? All right. Proper foot care. This is my favorite topic. No, it's just kidding. Poop is my favorite topic. But this is up there. So footwear is also really personal. Who here hikes with hiking boots primarily? Okay, how about people who hike with trail runners? Yep, see, there's a mix. So it kind of depends on where you're going and what you're doing. If you're doing something off trail, you probably want a hiking boot because, as you can see, these are going to give you way more ankle support. They've got thicker tread. They've got stuff on the toes so that if you are hitting things that you can't see or rocks, they're going to protect your feet a little bit better. But also trail runners can be really great because they're a lot lighter. And a pound on your foot is 3 pounds on your back because it's so far from your center of gravity. So from an energy standpoint, they can be really good. If you have a really, really heavy pack, I would say you probably want to go with a boot because you're more likely to lose your balance and stumble. You don't want to roll an ankle with additional weight on your back that could like cause you to sprain it or something like that. Besides the trail runner versus boot difference, there's also between Gore-Tex or waterproof boots and breathable stuff. If you are in a cold climate, I would say waterproof is probably a good idea, like doing snow related stuff, but I'm almost always going to go with a breathable shoe because the breathable shoe can dry, but the Gore-Tex never will dry on you probably when you're out there, and it's definitely going to get wet. If it doesn't get wet from the outside, if you're just constantly walking through puddles or wet stuff, it's going to get wet because your foot is going to get hot and it's going to sweat, unless you have incredible not sweating feet, which would be really advantageous. But if once your feet start sweating, they're going to get the inside of that boot wet and it's never going to dry. So it kind of depends. I have found that by far I prefer breathable boots and shoes, especially like if you're going somewhere where you're hiking in the river a lot, your shoes are obviously going to get wet and then they're going to dry and it's going to be great. But the Gore-Tex boots have a time and place. I just think that a lot of times they're somewhat overhyped for a lot of activities that could easily be served by a breathable shoe and give you less blister issues. Do you have anything to add on the boot shoe debate, Carson? Because I know you're a boot camp person.
Yeah, and that's largely just because I'm carrying a heavy pack and I can't carry that much weight with a trail runner. I tried, it was not comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Another thing is socks. Everyone has like their different own personal sort of like sock, ritual, like what they do with their socks to prevent blisters. Again, no cotton. Make sure you get the right cushioning. I have really sweaty feet, as I've already said. I'm a big sweater, so we definitely want something. I want something that's not super cushioned because I need a lot of breathing room for my feet. But that might change through the season. Also, like if it's colder, maybe you do need something a little more cushioning. Some people like to do 2 layers of socks, like a dress sock that's really thin on beneath their more regular hiking sock, and they think that helps them with blisters. So it's kind of trial and error. You got to find what works for you, but the best way to deal with blisters is to prevent them in the first place because they're not getting better until you're out of the backcountry and letting them rest. So if you can find out what works for you sock and shoes wise, it's going to go a long way.
Definitely don't overlook socks as a source of foot support. I kind of splurged on a pair of socks one time and I've had them they've been on every trip with me and I've had them for probably like 5 years or so. And they haven't worn out and they're like supportive. And so I can, my boots don't have to be as tight. They're very comfortable. And so you don't have to get all the support from your boot, and the support from a sock is going to be a lot more flexible than the support from a boot. So it's going to be more comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Darn Toughs are a great brand because if you get holes, you can send them in and you get new ones for free. So I really like Darn Tough. Also in Gingy, they are the toe socks. Some people that use them for, and I like them, but then it's just like a lot of effort to all your toes But those are some different options. Anything else to add about foot care? Anything about
Yes.
care?
Have a clean pair of socks for the next day. It doesn't need to be like fresh wash, but like don't have to put on wet socks in the morning. Have dry socks you can put on in the morning. And so depending on the trip, I might have 2 pairs with me that I alternate every day. Some trips I might have like 3 pairs and I alternate every day, and then I have a sleeping pair that's like also my emergency backup pair. But I always have dry socks for the next day.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Were you frozen, Carson, or was it my screen that was missing? I guess we're all good now. Everyone's frozen for a while. To add on what Carson said, it is good to have a good sock system. So usually a 3 sock system, one that I'm wearing, one that is an extra, and one that is my sleeping socks. So every night I always have clean, dry socks in my, like, to sleep with. And then the next day I can wear that sock that I was keeping in my backpack and wash those ones that I was wearing the first day, and then rotate like that. And then the last day I will hike out in my sleeping socks, which are like brand new, and they'll make you really happy. So that's like pro tip from both Carson and I on having like a good sock system to rotate through. Questions?
What is your favorite sock material if it's not cotton?
Oh, good question. Wool is really good. Also, wool synthetic blends. And they make wool, like, you might be thinking wool and thinking about like these itchy ones that maybe your grandma knitted for you or something. But they make
that.
What was that?
I am thinking of those.
Yeah. They make, so for example, these socks are wool socks. But you can see your grandma did not knit you socks like this. Like they're pretty thin, and they're soft. They're not itchy. It's a different kind. So merino wool, if you've also used, like, felt that in different shirts or whatever, that stuff, like smart wool, merino wool, it's soft. It's not going to be itchy and bad. So yeah, wool and wool synthetic blends are both really good. Thanks for that good question.
My favorite also is a wool synthetic blend. Neat. So while you're in the backcountry, it's important to have clean water. There's a few ways to do that. They all have their pros and cons. The most time consuming and most labor intensive is boiling. You'll have a stove with you most likely, and you can always boil water there. That can be particularly necessary if you're going on a winter trip. You might just not have access to new liquid water. You might have to melt snow and then boil the snow. Boiling as a sanitation technique is great because it kills both bacteria and viruses, but you'll have to filter it somehow, like through a handkerchief. Boiling won't get rid of stuff in your water. Gravity filters. Filters in general will take out bacteria, but won't take out viruses. Gravity filters are a very low maintenance option because you just get a bag full of water, hang it up in a tree, and let it feed dirty water through a tube, through the filter, into your clean water bag. It's very little work. Works pretty well. And then you get a little chance to take a break while you wait for that to filter. Life straws and squeeze filters can be good. I have a life straw like bottle adapter, so I have a filter in my water bottle. Those are very convenient. The Sawyer one pictured here is lightweight and can like be attached to a bottle. They're super convenient, but like other filters, won't take out viruses. UV sterilizing is great. It doesn't take as long as boiling. It doesn't take all that fuel. It's a great method. Hannah had that on our Grand Canyon trip. Kills both bacteria and viruses, but usually those things only filter 1 layer at a time. So if you have a lot of people, you might need more than one, or it'll just take a lot of time to get everyone's bottles done. Can pretty well, especially in a pinch. Our first aid kits have iodine, which will make the water taste horrible. So we also have iodine taste neutralizer. There's also other brands like MicroPure,
Your little
which
lighters.
MicroPure works pretty well, but that's expensive. My favorite is SteriPen, and I like the bottle filter personally, or a gravity filter if I'm in a group. Have anything to add, Hannah?
I'd say if you're just going out with yourself, it's really great just to have one of these Sawyer squeeze. You can screw it on top of a Life or a Smart water bottle, and then anytime you come towards a stream, just fill it up. And then if you're drinking right out of it, you're never having to like squeeze liters and liters of water, because that gets old really fast. They're great, but most filters like this, whether it's the gravity filter or one like this, if they freeze, it breaks the mechanism because it's a ceramic filter. So the water gets in there, it freezes, it expands, and then things that are larger than the micron size of those bacteria can get through and make you sick. So that's something like, if you do bring this and it's going to get cold at night, just put it in a baggie, cap your bottle, and put it in your sleeping bag with you, is a good tip. So these are really great for one person. I love the SteriPen because it kills viruses. And most of the time in the United States, it's not a huge, you're not really thinking about viruses, especially if you're going somewhere where there's not a ton of people. So this can be a really great one, especially if you're traveling internationally. This is also great. And this one, actually, some of them have batteries, but this one you can recharge with a portable battery bank or at your house. So that's also nice. It's a little bit more sustainable in that way. Plus, like when you get done, it will give you a happy smiley face. I just think that's really cute. Yeah, if you're in a group, you definitely want something that can do a lot more at once. But so it's kind of like you have your group gear for if you're going to go with a big group, and then gear if you're just going to go out for you. Any questions about water filter stuff? Sweet. Stoves. There are as many types of stoves as there are as water filters, and again, it really depends on your preference. The first one that's pictured in the upper left is called, which Carson has, Whisper Light, and it uses white gas. These are great because you can refill the gas in the red MSR container. So you're not generating more waste in containers. You can just fill that up, use it, fill it up, use it. These are great because you can cook for a large group. Whenever we go out on our group trips through our program, we always bring these. On the next photo on the right is a canister, and those you can't refill. So you have to buy them new every single time. So obviously that's not as good from a environmental standpoint, but they're also really fast and super easy to use. The white gas Whisper Lights, they do take a little bit more knowledge to be able to have them used, and sometimes they don't work on you. I've never had my stove not work on me. So you can get ones called Jet Boil, and that's just a little bit more of a stable system. So like in the one here, this is the stove, and then you can just screw it in here. And you want to wait till you hear like a tss, because that means that it's made a good seal. If you don't, there could still be some gas leaking out, and that could be a problem and cause a fire. So make sure you hear it go tss. And then have a metal pot. You can place it on there and cook your stuff. Just be really careful that you don't knock this over or the wind doesn't knock it over, because I've had my dinner ruined before and it was really sad. And yeah, I just want to be careful about knocking that stuff over. I really like it because I just turn the handle on this gas thing. Mine has a little igniter right here, and then the flame is going nice and strong. There are lots of brands of these. Pocket Rocket's really common. This one is called like the Windmaster Pro. So that's my favorite kind of stove. And then do you want to talk about alcohol stoves, Carson?
Sure. I don't have it with me, but I own a small alcohol stove. I love it. It's like 1.1 ounces. You can make your own. You can buy them. There's a number of different options. And they're super lightweight. And if all you need to do is boil water, it's the simplest option. It's hard to boil because alcohol. They're very lightweight. So unless you're going out for a very long time, or time is really critical, it's going to be less weight to just carry an alcohol stove. But you can't do fancy cooking on it. All it can do is heat water. And then with white gas, there's a number of different kinds of stoves. At the ORC, and pictured there, we have the Whisper Light. This one here is the Dragonfly. This one's a little bit more like for gourmet cooking. It has a good simmer function, whereas some of the other white gas stoves don't have that. It's a little bit bulkier, but it's you have more control over your cooking. And white gas stoves are pretty easy to repair in the field if you need to. They all come with repair kits. You can take them apart pretty easily. Yeah, I've had some not work, and I've been able to repair them in the field. Also had some where I haven't been able to repair them in the field. So know the stove you're going with. Definitely practice with it at home before you are relying on it to give you food.
Just one more thing. So like these canisters, they come in 3 different sizes. There's like the tiniest one, this is the medium, and then there's one that I call like rocket fuel because it's so tall, and I've never seen anyone bring that outside just because most people are not going out for that long or cooking gourmet meals on stoves like this because, like Carson was saying, they don't have a great simmer function. So like one of these medium ones, if you're going out with friends, that will probably be more than enough. I think I calculated it one time. It was like I think we were camping around 7,000 feet, and I could get 12 boils out of the tiny one. So this one would then be like roughly 24 boils if you're only boiling things. So these, like, you don't need to bring like 1 million of these when you go out. One is probably good enough depending on the days and number of people. Any questions about stoves?
So why is it that the white gas or the Whisper Light doesn't always work? Like,
I would say it's not that it's just can be more user error. It's got a little bit more working parts. So if something does go wrong, like the line gets clogged with fuel, for example, or some of the parts are not working, there's like a little repair kit. So it's just more working parts is my take on it. Carson might know more since he works at rental.
Yeah, if they're not well maintained, they can get dirty. And they can get dirty from soot in a lot of different places. And so basically repairing it is cleaning it. Sometimes repairing it means fixing a part. It's generally pretty easy to do. The part's very small. There's always more than one in the repair kit. So if you lose it, there's a backup. But generally it's because like a part wore out or because the stove is dirty.
Sweet. Any other questions?
yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Sweet. One of my favorite subjects, I think I'm saying that about them, is backpacking food. Now, hunger is the best sauce because I've made backpacking food at home and it definitely doesn't taste as good as when I eat it when I am out in the backcountry. But having said that, your standards are super low, so everything is going to taste pretty good. Backpacking is not like a great time to go on a diet. Like you need to be fueling your body properly because you're asking a lot of it. So carbs are going to be your source of energy. So if you're hiking along and you're just feeling like you just want to lay down and sleep in the meadow, probably need to have some carbs to give you that like burst of energy that you need to make it to camp. Fat is a source of warmth and long-lasting energy. So if it's going to be a cold night out, eat something really hot, dinner with high fat, and you'll sleep way warmer and way better. Also, when you're hiking all day long, you are probably going to be tapping into fat as a source of energy. So incorporating that is really important also to get the number of calories that you need. It's important to remember that. And then protein is helping rebuild your tired muscles. Can be a little bit trickier to get in than normally just because you need to bring things that are non-perishable backpacking, but there are lots of great options out there. General guidelines, no raw meats or perishable items. Hard cheese is okay. It really depends on the trip and the temperature. So for example, you're going backpacking in the Grand Canyon where it's 108 degrees, probably bringing any cheese is going to be pretty gnarly. Besides maybe like powdered Parmesan. Keeping it inside, deep inside your pack can be a good way to keep it like a little bit less gnarly, but you want to think about what kind of trip you're going on. Going in the winter, you can definitely bring salami and cheese for multiple days and not have to worry too much about that. Make sure you pick instant or quick cooking foods, not only because it conserves fuel, but because when you're really hungry, the last thing you want to do is realize that Emma was like, hey, I'm going to pack the dinner. And Lily's like, great, I'm so excited. What are we having, Emma? And then I was like, oh, actually, I accidentally got this rice that takes 45 minutes to boil. That's probably going to ruin their friendship. So you really want to make sure that you're bringing that quick cooking stuff. And there's lots of great like Knorr sides, mixed instant things. There is minute rice. Even pasta like mac and cheese that cooks in less than, I'd say, 8 minutes, you can easily cook out in the backcountry. But anything over 10 minutes, I would say off limits, especially if you're at higher elevation. It takes longer to cook that stuff because the water isn't boiling as hot. So keep that in mind too. Lightweight, because you don't want to break your back. So maybe you have to compromise on being fancy, and stuff that's compact. So good examples, got some right here. You can obviously get Mountain House, but if you want to be adventurous, also save some money, you can make your own. I love ramen. You can do so much with ramen. Add some peanut butter to the soy sauce one, and you've got like poor man's pad thai, then a little hot sauce. If you're really adventurous, you can get a dehydrator, which I know Emma has a dehydrator, and Brittany, I think. Yeah, both do. And like I dehydrated my own quinoa since it's traditionally not a fast cooking thing, and then added some freeze-dried veggies I bought online, add some seasoning packets. You can make your own meals. You can get really creative with it and have a lot of fun. Are there any questions about backpacking food?
Do you recommend any cookbooks, or do you just make your own?
I have several good websites that I can recommend that have really great stuff. And I also just finished working on a backpacking cookbook myself, so I can send you that too. Just has the breakdown of all these different foods that are like a good source of fat. And I think it's a little bit catered toward vegetarians too, just because it's easier and somewhat cheaper to eat that way when you're out in the backcountry. So I do adhere to some recipes just so I don't want to like try something new and get out there and be like, wow, I added 4 times more salt than was necessary. But I can definitely give you some links to some good websites at the end. Awesome. Anything to add, Carson?
A really simple approach to backpacking meals is like couscous plus a shelf-stable protein plus a seasoning pack, and you're going to have a good meal. Veggies are great. I don't take them on every single trip. I definitely take them on work trips to like make a nice meal. But you know, if I'm gonna be out for like one weekend, it's a personal trip. I might not. Vegetables I can make up for when I go home.
That also reminded me, like, tortillas are king, because bringing sandwich food, like sandwich bread, is going to get squished and be really sad probably. And bagels are kind of bulky, so tortillas are really the best. So usually breakfast is like instant oatmeal or granola and powdered milk. Got lots of snack foods that are easy to think of, like granola bars and stuff like that. And then lunch is usually tortilla, cheese, or you can put peanut butter and trail mix. You can add tuna packets if that's your thing. There's like tons of stuff, but also like weird things you would normally think is disgusting and not really eat is totally normal. Like, you know, you can add some cheese and some Fritos and some avocado, and you're like, sweet, this is awesome new wrap that I made. And then like Carson's saying, dinner, if you think about like a quick cooking carb, a protein, if you bring a little bottle of olive oil with you, then you can add some fat, and then go ham with the spices, I guess. Sweet. Any other questions about food? I love food.
Butter, depending on the temperature, can be great. I don't often like having liquid oil with me, but solid fat like butter, I really like having. Salted butter also in the backcountry is very good.
Mm-hmm. You can also buy individual serving coconut butter or coconut oil at Trader Joe's, which is super popular for backpacking stuff, if you've ever seen that. Yeah, once you start looking when you're at the grocery store through the lens of backpacking, you're just like, wow, I could do this and I could do that. It's actually really fun.
Your food properly. which generally means away from camp. Critters and bears like your food, just like you do, and you'd rather not wake up with them trying to get at it in your vicinity. So you don't, like, wherever you have your tents, you want to cook somewhere else, and then you want to store your food somewhere else from that. And that'll keep everything separate. So if animals are interested where you have your cooking or where you're keeping your food, they're not also interested in where you're trying to sleep. That's just a safety thing. When you clean up after dinner, for L&T, don't wash your dishes in lakes, rivers, or streams. Like, keep your dishwater with you. Don't, like, put it in some other source of water. Again, pack it in, pack it out. This says no soap. You can use soap depending on the land rules where you are. Some places you're not allowed to, like, cast dishwater. Some places you are allowed to cast, like, some gray water that you use for cooking, for cleaning your dishes. So just know the rules and proper procedures for the land that you're on. If you are at all worried about the sanitation of your dishes, you can always, like, after they're clean and, like, you've removed all the food particles, you can dip them in boiling water before or after your meal just to be sure that they're clean. When you store your food, a really good option is a bear can or a bear box. Bear box is the best. A bear box is a big metal box installed at the campsite, and it's something the bear can't get in and a rodent can't get in either. They're great, but you're not always going to have that available. Another option is a bear can, which is like a plastic can that is hard to open, so a bear can't get it open, and you keep your food in that. That's much more to carry because it's not this big rigid plastic thing. It's just a little fabric sack that you roll up at night when your food goes away. There it is there. If you don't want to take a bear can, you can, and it's allowed in the area you're going, you can hang food in a bear hang. It's got to be like 12 or 15 feet high, 5 or 6 feet from the trunk of the tree, out on like a stable branch. And you want it a few inches down. So bears are really good at climbing, and they can reach very high. So that's why you want it like 12 or 15 feet high so they can't reach it. You want it 6 feet away from the tree so they can't reach it once they've climbed. And then you want it a couple from the branch so that rodents won't crawl into it. And that's call that a bear hang. I find the easiest is just a bear can. Because I know if I brought all my food and it fits all in the bear can, then I'm going to be able to fit it with me the whole time. I don't have to worry about packing a bag. But it's not that good to carry. So, you have anything to add about that, Hannah?
Yeah, that's super personal preference. I would never bring my bear can with me everywhere because that is unnecessarily heavy, but like, it is personal preference. I always hang mine. But if you're going somewhere where hanging's not an option, like you're super high up in the Alpine, where there's like no trees or anything to hang it on, or the desert or something, then you might want to consider bringing, like, this is a rodent-proof bag, so like mice and things can't get into this. Or a bear can could be a good option in those times as well. This is, it's mentioned in there, the OP sacks, which is odor-proof. I like these a lot because they get rid of a lot of the odors. So even if you hang your food or if it's in a can, it's still going to smell like food. So putting your food in there kind of cuts down on those smells and hopefully is not attracting animals quite as much. So I do like to use those. And then to touch on the cleaning up after dinner. So usually after you clean your bowl, there's still going to be like sauce, or think about it, when you eat at home you have to rinse your dish out. So I always drink my gray water because it is the most L&T thing to do, even if you're allowed to cast it. But I make it a lot less disgusting if, like, I've got a dirty dish and I put water in it, and then I have my spoon and I have this tiny spatula on the end, and they sell scrapers as well. And then I can just kind of like scrape my food and eat it. It's basically like licking your dish, and then it's mostly all cleaned out, and then adding a little bit of water and drinking it, and then it's basically good to go. I usually also have a handkerchief that I make tortillas and stuff on, and then I can dry out my pot, and it's good to go for the next day. I've never gotten food poisoning from like not washing it in like the traditional way that you'd wash your food at home in probably like 400 nights out. So unless you're bringing raw meat or something, you're probably good to go there. And I never use soap, just because if you're using soap and it goes in water, it's not biodegradable in the water. It is still affecting aquatic life. You do need to cast it so that it is in dirt in order for it to break down. But the reason it's the most LNT way is to not cast your water is because any nutrients that you're putting into the system that's not there naturally is going to have an impact, and also going to attract animals to like, oh, this is human food. Oh, humans come here. And so now that campsite all of a sudden has like a rodent problem or something like that. So always best if you can just start with the habit of always drinking your gray water, not casting, not using soap. I think that's definitely best practice. And also like, kind of gives you status points. So like, well, I had tuna mac and I drank my gray water with tuna chunks. So what did you have for dinner? Like, oh, you only had mac and cheese. That's easy gray water to drink. So, think about it from that perspective, I guess. Anything to add, Carson, or any questions from anybody? Sweet. I never tell people about this at the pre-trip meetings for our trips, and then I make everyone drink their gray water, and it's really fun to see their reactions. So bring your friends and also play this trick on them. Oh, here's some examples of the food storage we talked about. So the bear locker at the bottom, bear can on the left, and bear cans like this size usually holds like, I don't know, 7 days of food, depending on how much you're eating. They're pretty big. And then on the right is a really cute drawing of a bear hang.
Did you draw that?
I did not draw that. It would not be as good if I drew it, I promise. Any other questions?
What's that thing on the bottom left? Do you tote that around with you?
No. So sometimes like Glacier National Park, if you camp there, they'll have these at the campgrounds. You don't see these in wilderness. Like I was talking about before, wilderness is supposed to be like natural, no developments. And if you walk up to this, you're going to be like, well, obviously humans were here. They put this bear locker here. Having said that, in Glacier, there's also usually places where you can hang your food. They have like the high wires at the campsites because there's only designated camping, because they want you to be able to hang your food. And because there's a lot of grizzlies there. So yeah, that's a bear locker. They're usually more front country sort of camping stuff, but sometimes they're in the back country. All right. Sleeping system. So this is a large part about LNT principle number 2, which was traveling and camping on durable surfaces. You don't want to camp somewhere where you're going to create a new campsite. So if you can find a camp that looks like someone's already stayed there, a lot of times, depending if you're in the national park, it's designated. You have to camp in this site. But a lot of other places, especially on national forest land, you can camp kind of wherever you want. But if there's already a campsite, you should choose that one because it's already impacted. You're not increasing your impact. If you're somewhere pristine, you just want to keep in mind that you don't want to camp somewhere that when you leave, it's going to look like someone camped there. And then the next person comes along and is like, wow, what a great idea. This is like an amazing camp spot. And that happens again and again. And you create a new trail to that campsite, or you create a new campsite altogether. And when we say durable, durable has to do with how easily it is sort of destroyed. So walking on snow, that is super durable because it's going to melt and nothing's going to change underneath. Rock is super durable. If you camp there, no one's going to know it. Think about sensitive alpine vegetation, like those tiny little flowers that like look like they have only seen sun for 6 weeks and then it snows on them again. Those are super delicate, and if you step on them, they'll probably die. So don't put your tent on like delicate alpine vegetation, or like in the desert, there's cryptobiotic crust, which is really, really delicate, 1 footstep and you've killed it, and it's like really, really old and very devastating. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about durable stuff. Besides the L&T aspects of selecting a campsite, you want to think about your safety. So you don't want to camp somewhere where it's a burn area. So recently a fire went through and there's a lot of dead trees that potentially have branches that can fall if it's windy on you and harm you. You also don't want to camp, unlike this photo, some very unwisely chosen campsite where it's going to start flowing water if it rains or in the night. This was a dry wash in the desert. And then once it wasn't as hot at night, it actually was flowing. So I woke up and there's like, a good inch of water. Don't do that. You also want to try to get something that's flat, not like sort of indented, because if it started to rain, you don't want to be like in a puddle or anything like that. So it does take a little bit of time to select a good campsite. But most of the time, if there's already a campsite made, it probably has these things in mind. Anything to add about campsite selection, Carson?
Nope, I think you covered it pretty well.
Sweet. So in addition to selecting your campsite, before you go, you need to figure out what kind of shelter you want. There are a million different kinds, but the kind of 3 basic methods are you're sleeping in a tent, an enclosed structure so that you're not being annoyed by bugs or rain, a tarp, which takes a little bit more skill to set up, but is usually lighter. And those can have bug nets too, so you still don't have to worry about getting eaten alive by bugs. And then cowboy camping, which is this picture where I don't have my tent. I know it's like, hopefully I know it's not raining at night, and you just sleep under the stars, which is kind of nice. Sleeping bags are another element of your sleeping system to keep you warm. We'll talk a little bit more about these later. But you want to make sure where you're going you're going to have a sleeping bag that's good for that temperature range. So if it's going to be 30 at night and your bag is rated to 30, you're going to be like survivably warm, but you're not going to have a good time and you might not want to go backpacking ever again. So something to think about. And then sleeping pad, everyone thinks you need a sleeping bag to keep you warm, and that's the only thing that matters. But you can lose an incredible amount of heat to the ground. So having a sleeping pad that is warm is very important. And these also have temperature ratings. So you see in the picture, there's a gray thing. That's a sleeping pad. It's super, super thin, and that would not probably keep you warm at all. And then the inflatable one that's yellow, that's like rated to keep you warm to like 30 degrees. So that's like a really good sleeping pad. Like you're probably not going to feel much cold from the ground. Usually people don't carry both. That was just because I didn't want something to pop my sleeping pad. But inflatable or foam, it really depends on your preference. I think inflatable is better because it's more comfy, but plenty of people like the foam ones. And then the last element is sleeping clothes. I always keep a pair of clothes in my bag, actually with my sleeping bag, that I only wear on my last day hiking out or when I'm sleeping, so that no matter what happens during the day, I can get absolutely drenched, rained on. I have something warm and dry to put on at the end of the day, and those extra socks. And then in a super emergency that you could use it. And then again, like last day, super huge morale booster. You got your new socks, you got your fresh sleeping clothes. You're going to walk out of there looking like, a diva. So those are all of the elements that you need to think about as part of a sleeping system. Anything to add, Carson?
Yeah, think about possible, when you plan your sleep system, think about possible types of emergencies that might happen at night. And this is mostly for like what you're wearing. Make sure if you need to exit your tent quickly, you will not get hypothermia when you run out your tent. So, in the summer, I might choose to like bring my sleeping bag liner and then not sleep in long underwear. In the winter, I am absolutely going to sleep in my long underwear because I have to go outside. I don't want to be too cold. So maybe think about what can go wrong at night and plan your sleep clothing accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to sleep in my sleeping bag with my like heavy puffy on and have it handy. That kind of thing.
Yeah, and once you get more experience, you'll have a system for your clothing and all of that, and you'll have time to think through all of that stuff, because it seems like a lot right now. But you'll come up with a system that works for you, that you like.
Neat. So once you part of your sleep system is your shelter. What we use at the Outdoor Recreation Center, what you will see a lot very commonly, is like a freestanding tent. It has poles on its own body and a rain fly. And so it's a little fabric house. It's going to keep the wind and the rain out, and you need to contain it in some kit, compared to a tarp tent on the other side, which uses trekking poles or sticks to stand it up. That can be a really great option for ultralight hiking. Why carry both tent poles and trekking poles when your trekking poles can put up your tent for you? And some people opt to sleep only with tarps and have no bug netting. Some people like hammocks. I find that by the time I'm carrying everything that I want my sleep system to do, which is keep me keep the wind out, keep the rain out, keep the bugs out, I'm already carrying as much weight as a tent. So a hammock for me doesn't make a lot of sense, but some people swear by them. I definitely recommend knowing your tent well enough that if something breaks, you know how to set it up without that piece. So if a particular pole breaks, well, how can you use maybe some twine and trees to set up your tent and have a shelter over you, even if it's not like the ideal shape? Know how to use your tent in less than ideal conditions.
Mm-hmm. Bring your repair kit in case. I had a friend and a mouse chewed through the mesh on her tent and we had really heavy bug pressure. So she's like, oh, the mosquitoes are getting in, just this tiny little hole that a mouse had chewed. So bringing your repair kit can be a really good idea. Also, a note on tents. They're not always completely honest. So say, oh, one person tent, that's going to be a really tight fit. You're probably not going to want to wait out a storm. A 2-person tent is going to be good for you and your stuff, or if you're going with someone who you don't mind being really, really close to. And then a 3-person tent is like a lot nicer for like 2 people and your stuff. And then like the side entry is better for more people because otherwise you're like climbing over the person's head to get out and that can be like a bit weird. So I do like side entry. Plus then you have a lot of vestibule space, which is that area under the fly to store your things as well if there's less space inside. I love my tent that gets set up with trekking poles, but if I'm going somewhere where I know it's going to be super high winds or maybe I'm going to be like on all rock or something where it would be hard to set that up, then I'll bring a tent that has poles. So there are definitely pros and cons to each. I was really nervous about going to a tent that took more skills to set up, but I do love it. But knowing how to set it up also when it's really windy is important, because setting things up in your yard is so easy because your grass is nice and lush and your stakes go in perfectly, but then when you're out there it's like there's rocks and nothing's going right. So think about those things and test your tent.
Another thought on tents, or rather the tent or no tent question. When we think about sleeping warm enough and we look at the temperature rating of our sleeping bags, those are usually rated, I think, for a 1-inch cell, maybe half inch. I think it's 1 inch closed cell foam pad in a refrigerator. So it's basically a lab setting, right? Like it's different having enough warmth, having enough warmth in a refrigerator. They're not all dealing with wind. So all of those, like being on snow, being like in a windy situation, all of those are going to make sleeping bag less warm. So if you have a 30-degree bag, 30 degrees in a tent, you're probably still going to be cold. 30 degrees outside, you're going to be really cold. So like have maybe some extra insulation than you think you need if you're going to have a less windproof shelter or no shelter.
I would say like for most 3-season stuff in the Pacific Northwest, if you have a 20-degree bag, you're going to be really good because you probably also have clothes, you're going to have a tent and a sleeping pad. You're not going to have issues being cold with if you buy a 20-degree sleeping bag. Is really, I think most people would agree with that. Any questions on tent types? Sleeping bags, there's a lot of different types. Again, can you all hear me? Yeah, okay, it says I have an unstable internet connection, but I'm going to go with it. The insulation type. Wait, do you have something to say, Carson?
No, I also have an unstable internet connection.
Oh,
So we're
okay.
talking over each other a little bit.
Great. Different kinds of insulation. Down is made with duck feathers, and it is kind of the gold standard. If you get it wet, then it's not going to keep you warm. That's the problem there. However, there should be no reason that your sleeping bag gets absolutely drenched. When you're storing it in your backpack, you should be keeping it in a waterproof bag. And then when you're in your tent, hopefully no disasters happen so that it gets completely drenched. In a lot of the down, it says hydrophobic down, it's like treated with chemicals that help it be less delicate when it gets wet. Because like when you're in a cold environment and your body is so warm and you're sleeping, then there is going to be some condensation on your sleeping bag in tent in the morning, so some wetness, and you're going to pack that sleeping bag back. Backpack, but with hydrophobic, not going to degree where it's not giving you any warmth. The other alternative is synthetic, which does not pack down as much, is way heavier for its weight, but can be a good option. They're usually a lot cheaper as well. These are better for car camping, I think, just because they're easier to like wash and launder. This is like rental shops have a lot of these because they're a lot more durable from that perspective. I would recommend down though for like most activities, I'd say. And there's different kinds of sleeping bags. There's mummies, which really are like wider up top and then get super narrow at your feet. So if you're someone who kicks around, that's probably not for you. I hate it. I feel like I am just like constricted, so I can't sleep in mummies, but they're a lot lighter because they're saving weight by having a more trim body. And then there's more regular size sleeping bags that have that same shape, but not to the same degree. And then there are quilts. So that's actually what I use, and I love it. So you can see like at the top, there's no part that fits around your head like a hood. It's just straight cut at the top. And then there's a zipper that goes down the middle. So it's kind of like, it's sewn at the bottom. So it's kind of like a big blanket almost with a foot box. And I like this because then I can kind of tuck it around me and I can move around a whole bunch. So if you're someone who likes to move around, quilts can be a really great option. But then if it gets really cold, I can zip it all the way up and like, oops. And it got caught because, there we go. I can zip it. And then on the strap, it's going to cinch up. Then I can kind of like curl in there, the little caterpillar. So those are some different types. It kind of depends what you like. This kind is going to be a little bit lighter because it's saving weight on that extra headpiece. But it has a little bit more movability. And then the heaviest bag I would bring and how small should it go? Those are great questions. I would say if you were getting a down bag and you wanted a 20 degree, you can get something for 3 pounds or under pretty reasonably. It might be a tiny bit heavier than that, maybe 4 pounds. Some of the synthetic ones that we have that are -15, do you know how much those weigh at the rec center, Carson?
I think they're like 5 pounds. And they only squish down to like
8.
this.
Yes.
I mean, maybe. I don't remember.
They can get to be pretty heavy. So you can probably get something really reasonably for, I would say, 3 pounds or under. And like this one will squish up to be this big. So really, really small, which is nice because if you're spending like half of your backpack to get your sleeping bag in there, that is seriously gonna cramp your style in terms of like getting other stuff in there. I have a bag just like this that I stuff that backpack in, or that sleeping bag in, and then I put my sleeping clothes and my sleeping socks, and then this is waterproof, and that goes at the bottom because I'm not dealing with any of that until I get to camp. Another option though is just a good old fashioned garbage bag. Actually, this is a trash compactor. It's a little bit thicker. And you just put this at the bottom of your backpack, stuff your sleeping bag down there, and then take the air out, twist it up. And then that's also a really great way to get your sleeping bag in there. And it's not quite as compressed because the more your bag is compressed, the less warm it will be. So like if I store this at my house, I'm not storing it squished, I'm storing it open. So it will like kind of fluff back up to life a little bit better day after day if you put it in, like don't squish it down quite so much. Those are really great questions. Oh yes, men's, women's, and unisex bags. They do cater these to the different sexes. So, but you can get like a men's bag if you want. It doesn't matter. But they do have some differences. So the women's bags generally are narrower in the shoulders and wider in the hips. I have a women's bag and I feel like it's amazing because I can just like roll around and sleep with like one leg up. Like it's really nice. So like if you're a guy and you want, you know, wider in the hips, like go for it. Get that women's bag. You won't regret it, I'm sure. They also have more insulation, especially in the torso and the feet, because women tend to sleep a little bit colder, which is also a nice perk. And then lengthwise, I'm not sure if this varies so much between men's and women's bags, but you can, short, not short, short, regular, and long. Long is if you're over 6 feet. You're going to need, otherwise your sleeping bag is going to end here and you'll be like, oh, I'm cold up here still. But if you have a bag that's a little bit too long for you, instead of getting one that's specifically short, you can just tuck that extra bit of length on your feet underneath you, so you're not spending energy to warm up that bit. Or you can shove some clothes down there to take up that open space also. But yeah, you can buy bags to fit your body exactly if you want as well.
And not just your body, but your sleeping position. Different companies have different widths. Like some make bags specifically so that if you want to curl up in a ball, there's still room for you. I find the ones we have at the rental shop, if I curl up, which I do a lot just because it's comfortable, especially in the cold. If I curl up, I'm going to have a cold spot on my bag, which defeats the purpose of curling up because then I'm cold. So you can have a bag that not only fits your body, but fits your sleeping position.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Some companies now also make 2-person sleeping bags. So I've tried this out and it was a disaster. Because like think about trying to share the covers like in a normal situation in the house, but then think about trying to share a sleeping bag when it's really cold out and the other person has way more. So just something to think about. Even if, you know, if you want to get a 2-person sleeping bag, make sure that you've got a policy sharing. And also like sleep temperature, because one person sleeps super hot and the other is really cold, and you have the sleeping bag is person, then that person's gonna be sweating a whole bunch. So anyway, something that's out there, not always the best, but thought I'd mention it.
So self-care in the backcountry is super important. If you're not able to take care of yourself, you're gonna have a bad time. So some big spots that we've already talked about a little bit: feet, chafing. Those, we want to avoid blisters, want to avoid chafing from seams on our clothes. Those are kind of key points of self-care, especially when backpacking, because you need your feet to carry you everywhere. Sunburn is also a major point of self-care. Do what you need to do to avoid sunburns. There's a few options. One is sunscreen. Personally, I am pale enough that I put it on 3 times a day. I'm still gonna burn. So I like UPF rated clothing. So my clothing works as my sun protection. I will totally look like a dork, all covered up with the hood and a hat and sunglasses, and have no sun on me, and very little sunscreen, maybe just a little bit on my nose, a little bit here. That's how I stay safe from the sun. I also need to think about hygiene, which includes oral hygiene, body hygiene. So a few approaches to hygiene. You can take your normal oral care kit. Usually I take a toothbrush, but I break off the stem just so it's just save a little space. Okay, oral care, wet wipes for body. Hydration is another important part of self-care. We talked about water purification. The other thing to consider is how you're going to carry it and consume it. Some people water, and people hydration packs to you. Obviously, which means your pee is not too yellow and you're peeing often. There used to be recommendations about how much you wanted to drink based on how long you were out and your activity level, and turns out your body can tell you that. If you are thirsty, drink water. If you are not, don't worry about it. There have been some like kind of rare medical problems where people have too much water and not enough electrolytes and the balance is out of whack. Just drink when you're thirsty. It works out pretty well. Again, like we were talking about with food, don't start a diet on the trip. Bring calories from carbs, protein, salt. With your back. So minimum food mixture. Any more self-care thoughts, Hannah?
That was good to me. One thing I recently learned is like if you're really thirsty, your body can only really like use a liter per hour. So if you drink, you're like, oh, I'm so thirsty, I'm gonna camel up, and you drink like 3 liters, your body's just gonna cycle those other 2 through, and you're gonna inevitably lose like important electrolytes. So like even like when you're super, super thirsty, like it's better to like continuously drink like a liter per hour than to just absolutely chug. So I thought I'd throw that in there because I thought that was interesting and I didn't know that. Any questions?
Sweet, thank you.
All right. So you touched on this, a good hygiene kit. It doesn't have to be anything super fancy, and it should hopefully not be very light so that you can carry more food. So the important things, you want to take care of your teeth. If you have contacts, you want to make sure you carry plenty of wet wipes to wash your hands since you're going to be sticking your hands in your eyes. Lip balm, super important, sunscreen. We talked about soap before. You don't need shampoo or deodorant even. Depends who you're going with and how small your tent is, I suppose. But also all things that have a scent or even things that are like unscented, but they're still hygiene items need to go in your food bag or in your bear can at the end of the day because they still have a scent to them, and animals will tell that there is a scent, but they won't necessarily know food scent versus not. So especially when you're in bear country, make sure all those things go in wherever you're like stashing your food. Want to make sure to keep it simple, hands clean to prevent spread of illness, and your body so that you don't chafe and get blisters. That's really the goal. It's not to like smell like a rose, it's to prevent these other more horrible things from happening, I guess. And the last thing is toothpaste, the most leave no trace way to get rid of your toothpaste. Our boss actually asked about this. You can swallow toothpaste and not have it harm your health. So if you're somewhere super delicate where there's a tiny little flower in the alpine environment, maybe you want to swallow it because you don't want to subject it to your toothpaste. Another okay or second best way to deal with it is just to kind of do a spray. So be like on an area that is away from water. You obviously don't want to do it on water. So like on dirt would be good, and then kick it under the dirt. You also don't want it to get like on plants directly or anything like that. If there's a fire ring around, you can do it in the fire ring and cover it up with the ashes because that's already an impacted area. But that's all I've got on hygiene, unless anyone has questions or you have something to add, Carson? No? Good? Any questions? Yes.
Hannah's favorite. So it's important in the backcountry to have a good poop kit. So you need something to dig. Trowel is best. Other things will work in a pinch, but you should have trowel with you. You need something to wipe with. Toilet paper, wet wipes are great. You can use snow or rocks or whatever around you if you have to. Some places you can, dig a hole, leave it in the hole, and you're fine. Some places you need to pack out your poop. You will need a dirty bag that's like a big bag to take all of your smaller poop bags. Kitty litter or something can be a good idea if you're making your own. You can buy fancy people outdoor pooping kits where you go in the bag and there's some litter in there to kind of clump it up. So yeah, you need the dirty bag and the storage bag to keep everything tidy as you take it out with you. It seems weird if you've not done it, and then you do it once, and you're like, oh, this is not a big deal. Do you have any questions about poop kits? Cool. Oh, actually, a hack I learned from someone on one of our trips, Hannah, was if you have your toilet paper bag, you put, if you have an orange on your first day, you put the orange peel in your bag, and then it doesn't smell so terrible when you take it out the next time.
Yeah, I've never usually had a problem with smell, but that's because I use wet wipes and they're like a little bit scented. So I just think that keeps things way cleaner, because then you can like designate this many for wiping and then some for your hands, and everything goes in the bag, and it smells kind of nice. I don't think it's that costly. Even if you're just using toilet paper, though, like Carson said, you do need to pack that out everywhere. It does not biodegrade as fast as you would think, especially a lot of toilet papers are bleached. So you definitely need to do that. Like we said before, with other things to wipe with, you can wipe with leaves, but you don't want to, I would say, maybe not like live ones. Like, don't like be picking something that's alive, just because you might be allergic to it, and that's not a time when you want to discover that this soft thing was actually poison oak. And you also don't want to like be harming the flora of the area. But if you see something that's dry and dead and you're in a pinch, you could use that, but at your own risk.
Yeah, toilet paper and wet wipes are like the standard. If you have none and you need to get clean.
I mean, the girl that I hiked the PCT with, she brought no toilet paper. She always did like sticks, rocks, snow, and dirt. And I'm like, I don't know how you kept clean for that many months. Like, maybe if it was a couple nights, but like this was like 130 nights. So
oh my God.
She was obviously hardcore. Another thing that I'll add about poop kit, this for like women's hygiene, is having like a pee rag is really awesome, because then you're not always like getting your toilet paper and then putting it in a bag. As a ranger, I'll find that a lot. Like, ladies just go pee and like leave their little toilet paper on top of like where they peed. I'm like, what the heck? This looks horrible. So if you just have a bandana, every time you can use like a different area of it, stick it on the back of your pack, it will dry, and hopefully the UV from the sun like kills everything. And then when you're at like a water source that's like flowing well and not like, a lake or something, you can rinse it out and like reuse it. I did that the whole PCT. It really helped me not get any UTIs, which I previously had a problem with before I started using this, just because it's hard to keep everything like dry and clean. So I really liked using the pee rag. Plus, like, ladies will know what it is, but guys don't. And then they're like, oh, look, a nice bandana. And you're like, I wouldn't touch that. And so it's kind of funny. But yeah, pee rags, I would definitely recommend those. Any questions about this whole kit? We'll get into the use in a second. So, all right, sweet. Dispose of waste properly is probably like or like, at least for me as a ranger, the most important L&T principle. You want to find a proper pooping area, which should be about 80 paces from water, camp, or trail. You don't want someone seeing you, obviously, for respecting other visitors. You also don't want to be close to camp, because if it attracts animals, and like just like you don't poop where you sleep or you eat. And then you want to stay away from water, because think about like when snowpack comes or heavy rains, if you're near water or in like a basin where it's going to drain into that lake, you want to think about like the impact of that. So maybe hiking up so that where you're going to the bathroom is not draining into the lake is really important. A lot of places that are high use these days have outdoor toilets called walawas. So if you see a sign that says toilet, it's going to lead you actually to like a wooden toilet where you can go to the bathroom. And that's the best, because you're concentrating that impact. The ranger district I work in also has these vault toilets that you can use, that they then like helicopter the poop out at the end of the year, because it's like such a large problem. So that's something you can do in some areas. Otherwise, you want to be digging a hole and find your pooping area yourself. Also, like, try to get a good view is always a nice added bonus. You want to dig the hole 6 to 8 inches. So like Nalgene size is usually a good thing to go by. Do your business. I find this to be way better than normal going to the bathroom, because it's anatomically more correct when you're squatting. So everything just, I don't know, feels way better. Pack out your toilet paper, like I said, and your wet ones, and then cover your hole up with some dirt. If you want to be like an L&T master, you find a stick, you can like mix some of the dirt in with the poo, because then the microbes that are going to break down your poo are getting mixed and it'll degrade even faster. But if that grosses you out, you don't need to do that, but you do need to dig the hole. And then cover it on top. And if it's an area where it's high use, there's a lot of people around and you've seen some other poos, or maybe you accidentally like dug into one where you were trying to dig your own hole, put a stick on it so it marks it as, hey, this is actually a cat hole, don't dig here. And then afterwards, wash your hands with wet ones or hand sani, and pat yourself on the back because you just disposed of waste properly, and rangers will love you. Any questions or anything to add, Carson? Nope. Awesome. If you do a lot of backpacking, you will find that going to the bathroom outside is very enjoyable, because otherwise, like normally you're just in your bathroom, but there's such a beautiful view when you're outside. So yeah, it's nice. All right, first aid kits.
Cool. So you should have some kind of first aid kit with you when you're out in the backcountry. There's a few different options. You can make your own. You can buy a pre-made one. I like buying a pre-made one and then like cycling stuff out as it gets too old, or as I use it. Definitely have a pen and paper with you so that you can write down somebody's problems, symptoms, etc. If you are a wilderness first aid, if you're any kind of first aid trained, you might have heard of a SOAP note, which is something you'll make just while you're treating somebody. Helpful to have a pen and paper, that sort of thing. Don't use what you don't know how to use. There might be stuff in a first aid kit that you buy that you've not been trained in. You know, if you don't need it, stay away from it. And lots of organizations offer wilderness first aid classes or wilderness first responders, kind of the next level up. They're pretty fun courses. Definitely recommend them if you intend to be out recreating. I would definitely not recommend going out with someone who doesn't have some kind of training. And they can be kind of fun because you'll pull out makeup and do scenarios. It's a good time. Any questions on first aid kits? Definitely have enough stuff for blisters. Blisters is going to be the most common thing you run into, and no matter how many times you nag people you're going with about proper foot care, someone's not going to do it right, and they're going to get a blister. Have lots of blister stuff. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, bring stuff that you know that you use. So if you have any like medications, extra inhalers, EpiPens, those are important things to remember. Definitely lots of blister stuff and things that work for you. I make all of my own first aid kits from stuff that I think I need, but buying the kits is also a great way to do it if you don't really know where to start. And I definitely recommend those classes. Wilderness First Aid is an awesome class because I feel like there's so many wives' tales out there. Like, if you get a snake bite, you should suck out the poison. But you should not suck out the poison. And so Wilderness First Aid is really great at kind of showing like, oh, if someone's hypothermic, here's how you deal with it, and things that you probably would run into. I feel like a lot of times people go in the outdoors, they're afraid of like if they see a bear or these other more rare scenarios, although it's quite common that you'll probably run into someone that has like a low-grade hypothermia or has a blister or something like that to deal with. So I would definitely recommend doing one of these courses because the less fear you have, the more knowledge you have, the more comfortable you are in going out, and also the less stuff you have to carry because you won't be packing your fears so much, so to speak. Questions about first aid?
If you buy a commercial one, make sure you find out that you don't know where something is when you need it.
Mm-hmm.
Know where everything is.
Yeah. All right. Maps. In the age of technology, we have our phones and they often have maps and GPS on there, and that's really great, but it's not a replacement for a paper map and compass, because too many times like that phone can die if it gets too cold, if it gets too hot, you drop it in the river, something bad can happen to it. So you always want to have paper maps. Plus it's a great skill to have and to learn how to use, and actually can be really fun and a lot more adventurous than just like following your GPS. National Geographic maps are one type. These are available for most national parks. So if you're going to be backpacking in a national park, you can just Google these on Amazon and they usually have them, and they're really nice. They're waterproof, they're really big, and they've got like all the distances and top lines, which show you elevation changes. You can also get green trails maps. Usually if you go into a ranger district at a forest service, these first, and they'll say area they are, and then you can just bring this with you in a plastic bag, and then you'll have your map. If you're super techie, you can get CalTopo, which allows you to create your own maps because it has like the whole state of Idaho, for example, is mapped, and you can select the area that you want and print off maps just for you. Some electronic resources to pair with the paper map are I like Gaia GPS. That way you can like mark your trail. So if you go somewhere new or you want to know what your stats are, you can get independent GPS units. It's just a lot more extra electronics for me, so I would rather just have something on my phone more casually. And then spot devices, actually have mine if I can find it. These can also do some GPS stuff, and then also if you were to get yourself in a pickle, you could say SOS instead of just sending the button as texting to the county. So it could be like, hey, I broke my ankle, I'm here, here's the resources I have, and communicate with them. Some of them you just press a button and like they're coming no matter what, even if it was an accident. So those are some of the different electronic resources. I guess one fun fact about maps, does anyone know the difference between the white area on the map and the green area on the map? So when maps were made, or when they were deciding how to color them differently, they made the distinction of it's white if you cannot hide a battalion of men, and it's green if you can hide a battalion of men, which is a battalion is like 25 to 50 soldiers. So if you're looking at the map, the white area is probably like a meadow or something that's more clear of vegetation, whereas the green is probably a little bit more cleared, like trees and that kind of thing. Anyway, it's like random history fact I thought was interesting.
Alrighty. In terms of, oh, did we advance the slide? I'm still looking at the map slide.
I'm sorry. Any questions on maps? So like a super brief overview. All right, it's advanced.
So, in terms of navigation, we have or another number of tools we can use, compass and map, like we were just talking about. Obviously the most basic and the least dependent on batteries. To use those, you need to know how to set a declination and take a bearing and do triangulation. All those things are different map and compass skills. Setting a declination is like magnetic north and true north are different directions, and magnetic north moves around. So when you have a map, you need a current map, so it'll tell you the correct difference in degrees from your location between magnetic north and true north. And so setting a declination is just, yeah, Hannah's got it right there. Putting in the correct angle on your compass so that when your compass points to magnetic north, you can follow true north and actually go the right direction. When you and then follow that on the map. When you want to triangulate, that's when you're trying to figure out where you are. You've got a number of details in your environment. Maybe you know a peak over there, another landmark over there, and then you can find your angles, from your point of view, find the angles to those, and then on your map, find where those angles intersect, and that's where you are. I've done this a couple times. It's not great to need to know how to do it. Or sorry, it's not great to do it if you have to, but if you need to know, it's a good skill to have. And practicing is the key to being good at these things. Different like parks departments sometimes put on orienteering courses, like there'll be a permanently installed course you can go to and practice these skills. And so it's a good way to make sure you know how to use your tools before you need to rely on them for real navigation. And our guys got good videos on navigation there. Anna, do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I am not so great with navigation usually. Like I kind of struggle using the map and compass, and 3D things are sometimes hard for my brain. So I was actually looking at REI resources recently, and I felt like they did a really great job of introducing these topics. But again, like visually and verbally they're talking about it or you're reading it, but really going out and using it like will go such a far way. So if you have somewhere local, especially right now, and you can buy a map and a compass, like you can go practice somewhere local, you know where you are. And it's kind of fun. And definitely necessary if you want to do more off-trail travel. I think this is one of our last topics.
Yeah. So the more as time goes on, the more electronics we have in the backcountry. So I always go out with a big battery bank and a cord to recharge my stuff. Some headlamps need recharging. Some, your phone, especially with its GPS, might need recharging. Camera gear, things like that. Headlamps are pretty key in the backcountry. You need some source of light. If you have a headlamp that needs single-use batteries, be sure to bring some extras. Otherwise, bring something to charge it. And then Hannah's favorite topic, drones.
So I added this to electronics not because I bring a drone, but because I have seen a lot of issues with people bringing them into the backcountry because they're like kind of a new thing for civilians to have in the last few years. And we talked about wilderness in the beginning. You're not allowed to have drones in wilderness areas, and you need to always ask permission, like if you're going on national forest land, and you're not allowed to have them in national parks either. So since there's a lot of differences between the land types, it's good to call and ask if you can use them because they are very disruptive. I went to Kolchak Lake, which is a super popular area in the enchantments, working last year, and someone was chasing a bald eagle with a drone, and that made a lot of people really angry, and then they got really angry at me because I couldn't find that person. So just respect the wilderness and the rules. No bringing your drones. Also, it's the largest ticket that I can write, and I can confiscate it, and I don't want to do that. I had to do it one time last year, and the guy, I felt bad. He just like totally didn't realize those were the rules and didn't know what wilderness was. So save your buddies and yourself from a hefty ticket and spread the word about drones. There's my Ranger soapbox moment.
Electronics come in different levels of waterproofness. There's good cases available, and like dry bags are not super expensive. So make sure you know how to keep your electronics appropriately dry when you're going out.
Yeah. Sweet. All right, I know we were a little bit over time, but if anyone has any questions related to anything we talked about or anything we didn't touch on, you can put them in the chat or ask us. And if you would like this PowerPoint, if you want to type in your email, we can send it to you. And then you can obviously get in touch with Carson or I. I'll put my email in here anytime if you have questions about stuff, because we love working on this. All right, if there aren't any further questions, thank you guys so much for being part of our filmed backpacking skills clinic. You guys were awesome. You're very engaged, which was really fun, talking about this stuff. So hopefully you guys can get out soon. I think State Park said they were opening actually on May 5th. I just saw that for day use. So once things are safe to get back out and backpack again, hopefully you can take some of these skills and go do that. Anything to add, Carson?
Nope. Thanks everyone for coming.
Yay, thanks for being part of our skills clinic.